Dear audience, we are starting our event. The internet is not good in my region, so Alexander Godienko, Oksana Boravchenko will be moderators. We are very grateful to Robert Zubrin, who agreed to share his knowledge with us.
Dear Robert, we are glad to greet you at tonight's event. We are glad to see you. Unfortunately, we have less direct listeners that than could have joined us today. You know, Kiev has shortages of power, so many of people don't have power or don't have internet connection at the moment. But I believe far more people will see this event later, when it will be recorded.
All right, that's
We are listening.
good. I'm happy to help out, and I understand the situation.
Yes, Robert. We are now ready to listen to your speech on colonization of Mars.
Right. Okay. So the basic thrust of my talk today is not going to be how we can get to Mars, but what might we create on Mars and how that could be important for the future of human civilization. Okay, and not just on Mars, but on Earth, especially on Earth. And this goes to the significance of a frontier, of having a frontier. Now, America, its history is as a frontier society, and that has had a very significant role in shaping what we became. And perhaps Ukraine, you know, the word Ukraine is actually related to the word frontier. Frontier comes from the French word front, and Ukraine, of course, cry, the edge. The importance of that is the frontier, at least in the American understanding, is a place beyond which the rules haven't been written yet. Okay, it is therefore, in principle, at least, a zone of freedom. It is a place where people can go where the rules have been written yet and create something new. Okay, what Mars offers humanity today is a new frontier, a place where people can go where the rules haven't been written yet. Now, I'll just briefly discuss the technical side of why I believe the colonization of Mars is possible, but then I'm going to talk much more about what we might create there. As you know, the SpaceX company has, over the past 10 years, radically cut the cost of space launch by introducing mostly reusable rockets. The cost of space launch was from 1970 to 2010, steady at $10,000 a kilogram. It was like a law of physics. But since 2010, as a result of the introduction of the Falcon line, that has been cut by a factor of 5 to $2,000 a kilogram. And if SpaceX is successful with their Starship, it will cut it by another factor of 5 to more like $400 a kilogram, because because it's fully reusable. The Falcon, the Starship will have about 5 times the launch capacity of a Falcon 9, and at most the same cost, possibly less per flight. And this is the future, and it's at this point, it's the future almost separate from what happens to SpaceX, because you know, Elon Musk is a risk taker. He skates very close to the edge of the ice, and he's eccentric and erratic. And so I can't predict what the future of SpaceX is going to be. But the fact is that they have proven a point that it is possible to do these kinds of things, that it is possible for a well-led entrepreneurial organization to do things in the space field that was previously thought had to be done by the governments of superpowers. And not only that, do it in 1/3 the time at 1/10 the cost, and even do things they had thought impossible altogether. And in particular, reusable launch vehicles and large ones. So if SpaceX should fail, others will step forward and implement these ideas at this point. They have been proven far enough that they're going to happen. And now you need to understand, reusable launch vehicles means there's going to be used launch vehicles. Okay. And there are going to be a lot of them. And thus, for the same reason that people today, many people who have nowhere near enough money to buy a new car can nevertheless own a car because they can buy used cars, which cost maybe 1/10 as much or less. Now, Musk told me that he thought he could build starships for $10 million each, which means he'd probably sell them for $20 million each new, which means they'll probably be at some point available for $5 million each used, because these things are also going to be used for intercontinental travel, all sorts of things like that. So if they could take 100 people to Mars, $5 million divided by 100 people is $50,000 a person. That's the kind of money someone can raise if they want to move to a new land, if they want to change their life. And so it will be possible for people to emigrate to Mars. Now, say, how can you live on Mars? Well, you can live on Mars the way you can live anywhere else, which is by developing the technologies that are needed to turn the materials there into resources. You know, humans are not native to the entire Earth. We're native to Kenya. We're not native to Ukraine or Colorado, where I live, okay? This is not our natural habitat at all. We have these long, thin arms with no fur. No one could survive a single winter night in either of our countries without technologies like clothing, which is a technology, fire, the development of technologies that allow food to be available all year round. These are things that the most primitive people did not have. By developing them, we became possible to become a global species living in all sorts of environments that would have been absolutely deadly to the first humans in the true state of nature. And similarly, Mars has all sorts of materials. And if we can develop the technologies to turn them into resources, then Mars will have resources once there are resourceful people there. Now, you can say, okay, technically that is true, that people could develop the technologies that allow them to make glass and steel and aluminum and plastics and grow food and make everything that one might need on Mars. But what is the economic basis of it? Well, that's an interesting question. I believe that well, first of all, what you're going to have on Mars is what you had in the American frontier, which is a labor shortage. Okay. And precisely because we had a severe labor shortage here, we were driven to develop labor-saving machinery. And America became famous for labor-saving machinery. Now, what is labor-saving machinery? It's really machinery that multiplies the power of labor. Okay, it allows a person to do much more product. Now, standard of living is product available per person, which on average equals product produced per person. And therefore, Americans became rich by comparison with other countries because we developed an economy based on labor saving or labor productivity multiplying equipment. Now, and of course, this became a strong incentive in addition to personal liberty, and I'll discuss that in a minute, for so many people to come here and populate this country. Although half of America is still not settled, if you want to know. Okay, now on Mars, you're going to have a labor shortage much more severe than anything we had in colonial or frontier America. And there's going to be not only a drive for the creation of labor-saving machinery and automation, but things that are the modern and near future extension of that, including robotics, artificial intelligence. These sorts of things are going to become a Martian specialty. They will need to both maximize the productivity of human beings by both multiplying the power of their work and also maximizing the diversity of their skills. That's artificial intelligence will do that. And things that might be shunned on Earth because people here, they're concerned with protecting jobs, okay? Martians will want to eliminate jobs, okay? You know, there was a time here in America that 90% of people were farmers. That's how many people, it took 90% of the people to feed the 100%. Now we feed the 100% with 3%. And that means that all the rest can be making other things than food. So clothing, which used to be expensive, is now cheap. Okay, and innumerable other things and things far beyond that. Books, and then of course electronics, and you name it. Anyway, this is what the Martians will do. Now, these inventions developed on Mars, and there'll be inventions in other areas too. Mars energy. You don't have fossil fuels on Mars, and there's no hydroelectric power, and the wind is very thin, and solar energy is weak. So they're going to need nuclear power, and especially the deuterium, which is the fuel for fusion reactors, is 5 times as common on Mars as it is on Earth. So I believe the Martians will have a strong drive to develop thermonuclear fusion power. Okay, the biotechnology, which has encountered some resistance on Earth, basically, if you want to know, from farmers using older types of agriculture. On Mars, they'll say, no, we need to have the maximum amount of crops grown per square meter because we don't have giant fields to work with. We have to grow our crops in greenhouses. And so we have limited acreage and we have limited manpower. So we want the most productive crops possible, and we're going to use biotechnology to the maximum. And they're not going to be held back. So Mars will become an engine of invention. And these inventions invented in order to meet the necessities of Mars will be licensable on Earth as patents. Okay. Now, and that will bring in the income that Mars needs for its imports. Mars will not be autarkic. It will always need some imports. Countries that attempt to be autarkic on Earth become very poor because they cannot take advantage of the global division of labor. But you don't want to import steel to Mars. It's too heavy. You want to import to Mars, you know, things like this that have very high value per unit weight. And you need to be able to pay for them. So that's where they'll get their export income. But if Mars is an economy based on invention, it needs to be an economy based on freedom, because it is not just, it's not quite true that necessity is the mother of invention. Necessity is a driver for invention, but the mother of invention is freedom. Okay, people need to be free if they're going to invent. Now, this comes to another point. what kind of societies will develop on Mars? Well, there probably will be many different settlements, many different city-states founded on Mars by people with different ideas on what the best society is. But the ones that will grow is the ones that will attract the most immigrants. Okay, this is why I believe that any tyrannical societies on Mars will be stillborn, because no one will want to emigrate there. Okay, so it's a contradiction in terms. It defies the growth principle necessary for the development of a Martian city-state. So if a Martian city-state did become tyrannical, its growth would stop. It would stop because it would not attract immigrants, and it would stop because it couldn't engage successfully in invention. You know, at the time of the American Revolution, the economy of the Caribbean islands was actually bigger than that of the 13 original colonies from, Massachusetts through Georgia. Because they had these very profitable sugar plantations. And in fact, that's one reason why the British during the American Revolution devoted most of their fleet to winning islands in the Caribbean, and not enough to hold the colonies, the American colonies. But once we became free, the vast majority of immigrants came here, not to Cuba or Puerto Rico or Jamaica or those Haiti or those places. We left them far behind because this is where immigrants wanted to come, and this is where immigrants could exercise their talent, which therefore tended to make America an ever more promising location for immigrants. So this development of institutions on Mars will be governed by what you might call a process of natural selection. There's no guarantee that the people that go to Mars will have the best ideas, but those that do have the best ideas will establish the city-states that grow and become the pattern for Mars. So that is why Mars will be free. That is why. And that is why Mars will be a center of invention. And that is why Mars will be a place that sets an example for societies back on Earth. Okay. The American founders called this new republic of ours a noble experiment. Now, the ideas that they founded it with were not original with them. They were the ideas of 18th century European liberalism, Enlightenment liberalism. But these ideas, while popular among certain circles in Europe, could not be put into effect there because there were already ruling institutions there, okay, kings and established churches and guilds and all sorts of things that could control what could be allowed to happen. And so these ideas were generally viewed as impractical. And, freedom of religion, how can you have freedom of religion unless everyone believes the same thing? There will be chaos. Establishment people in Europe would say. We said, well, we're going to try that. Well, how can you have trial by jury? If the common people can judge the cases, you'll never get a conviction. Well, we're going to try that. Okay, how can you have freedom of the press? If the press can say anything it likes, the people will overthrow the government. No, we're going to try that. And it worked. At least it worked better than anything else had worked. And so it became a success, and and millions of people came here, and frankly, it became the model. For judging a society in the world today. We judge a society in the world today by whether it has democracy and human rights. And even those societies that don't have such things try to pretend that they do, because that's the standard. And the And I think that Mars will set new and higher standards. And now, you know, it's almost always the case that any society is unaware of its most blatant forms of oppression. Okay. You know, if you look at the ancient world, for example, while many ancient writers certainly expressed the idea that it was bad to be a slave, you could look in vain through Plato or Aristotle or any ancient philosopher, or even the Bible, and you will find no call for abolishing slavery. You won't find it. It's not there. Yes, it's unfortunate if you are a slave, but there's no statement that slavery is wrong. Now, what is the most characteristic form of oppression in our society today? Well, now here I'm speaking as an American. We have it pretty good. There are a lot of forms of oppression that exist in other countries, don't exist here, but there is one that actually is quite prominent here. And that is oppression of the uncertified. That is, you have to have all kinds of certificates to be entitled to practice various professions here. And these certificates have to be obtained through expensive universities or similar training programs and so forth, so that even people who are fully capable of, you know, there are people who do not have teaching certificates that could easily teach school. Okay. You know, there are people who have all kinds of skills that can't practice them. They're excluded. Now, we, I think, probably have less of this than many other countries, and we used to have much less of it than we do now. But the Martians will not be able to tolerate this. That is precisely because they have a labor shortage. They will not be able to exclude people from exercising the talents that they have based on some formal criteria. So this is a form of liberty which is denied for the most part in many countries on Earth, including my own, and but which the Martians will say, no, you don't need this. You don't. This is not the way to go. And I think the prosperity that comes from allowing people to fully exercise their talents will demonstrate that this is where the future lies. And so I want to have a lot of time for questions. I want to, though, then comment on something relating to the current situation. Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you that, as you know, yesterday, Zelensky was selected as Time Man of the Year. And he certainly deserves it. And I think he's the most deserving of that award of any person since 1940, when Winston Churchill was Time Magazine's Man of the Year. The two figures are comparable in a number of ways. And Zelensky earlier this year gave a speech to the British Parliament in which he quoted from Churchill's most famous speech, which is the "We shall fight on the beaches" speech, which is from June 4th, 1940, when the British and French armies had been defeated on the continent. France was in the process of totally being overrun by the Nazis, and the British had escaped from the continent with their army, but without all its weapons, so it was helpless. And Hitler actually offered the British a deal. He said, look, let's make peace. You can keep your empire. All we want is Europe. And Churchill said, no, we're not agreeing to that peace, and we're certainly not going to surrender. And this is where he gave the speeches: we shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender. And that's the part that Zelensky quoted. But the speech actually goes on. And here's what Churchill said. He said, we shall never surrender, and even if, for which I do not a moment believe, this island, or a large part of it, were subjugated and starving, then our empire beyond the seas, armed and guarded by the British fleet, would carry on the struggle until, in God's good time, the new world with all its power and might steps forth to the rescue and liberation of the old. Okay, which in fact it did. Within a week of Dunkirk, Franklin Roosevelt, our president, had decided to send to the British 1 million rifles, 7,000 field artillery pieces, 100 million rounds of ammunition, and they were there within weeks. And this, and their further aid came after that. Now, and then of course, we even entered the war, though that took some time. Now, if we relate this to today, obviously the United States is providing some arms to Ukraine, and I'm proud of that, but I'm also distressed at the fact that we're not providing a lot more. We provided a lot more, a lot faster in 1940. So in other words, the new world did step forth to the rescue of the old, but we're not as new as we used to be. Not as new as we used to be. The kind of ethic that and culture that drove that assistance to Britain is still operable in America, but not as strong. We need a new world. We need a newer world. And that's what Mars promises us. It promises to revive these values, the passionate defense of liberty, and the example that a free society can make, and the customs that it can demonstrate to be better, and all of that. This is what humanity needs. This is what Mars will do for Earth. Okay. We need a newer world, and Mars will give us that. So I'd be happy to take questions.
Dear Robert, thank you for your inspired speech. Thank you for your high opinion on Ukraine. But speaking about our politicians, from my experience, it's not about Ukraine alone. To my experience speaking to my friends from US, from UK, from Canada, even Japan, always opinion from inside of the country on their politicians is much lower than from outside. Those who look good from outside have quite a variety attitude from inside the country. So we won't continue this time on this. I want to ask you a question. Mars is very unhospitable. There are many unhospitable and far away places on Earth, you know, like Canadian Arctic, Russian Arctic, Nova Zembla, Antarctic continent. Were there attempts in recent centuries to colonize them, not just for resources like Golden Rush in Alaska, like Norilsk in Russia, not just to exploit the resources, but exactly to form new societies for something that you would like to see in colonies on Mars?
Well, you see, the thing is this. If a frontier is going to give rise to a new society, it has to be sufficiently distant from the old. Okay? And in this respect, the American frontier was more fortunate than the Ukrainian frontier. If we had been as close to Europe as you are to Russia, we probably never would have become free. But we were far enough away, given the technology, the time, sailing ships and so forth, that we could, in fact, start a new world. It certainly would be easier to colonize the Canadian North more substantially than it currently is inhabited. and Alaska. And in fact, of course, the population of those regions is increasing. But they're not going to give rise to a new society in the way that is possible on Mars. That's the difference. To start somewhere new, you have to have sufficient separation.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, it's a complex question. Do you want me to read the questions? There are questions in the chat, or can you read them by yourself?
I can read a question. What do I think of Musk's position? I think he's poorly educated on this subject. I think also, if you want to know, okay, Musk's weakness is the same as his strength. It's the same, is that Musk wants to be a world historic person. He wants eternal glory for doing great deeds. And this impulse within him is what is responsible for his great accomplishments. It's why he created SpaceX and Tesla, for example. Okay, but it also makes him manipulable. And when Putin contacted him and basically said, look, you can be the man who saves the world from nuclear war by proposing a peace plan, he fell for it. He fell for it. And so he could be manipulated based on, you might say, being flattered in that way, or being tempted with that prize, that he could be the person who made humanity interplanetary, who stopped global warming, and who saved the world from nuclear war. And so that's what happened there. But I think some people have gotten to him. I attempted to get to him because I do know him, and other people did as well. And while he hasn't changed his position, he has shut up on this issue. So there you have it. But sure, what Musk did is illustrative of the nature of his character, which is both responsible for his accomplishments and also for his flaws.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, all human personalities are complex and usually deal with their own agenda. There are two questions more, but I think you can answer them together. Who should decide who should be the first visitors, and how the selection of the first Martians should be organized?
Well, first and foremost, the people that go to Mars are going to be self-selected. Okay, no one is talking about conscripting people to send them to Mars. I think if anyone did try to start a colony on that basis, it would fail. The people who go to Mars will be self-selected, of people who do want to start a new life in a new world, and it will be people who, I mean, look, what is the good life? Is it the life of comfort and safety, or is it the life where you do have a chance to do great deeds? And if you want the life of comfort and safety, you will not be the person that goes to Mars. Because it'd be easier to have comfort and safety here, unless perhaps you're part of a population that is being severely oppressed and you need to escape. But people will go to Mars who see the vision of having a chance to make humanity multiplanetary and to create new branches of human civilization that will set a positive example for the rest. Do I want to move to Mars someday? Well, if I was given the chance, I would, but I don't think I will. I'm actually 70 years old now. And things have unfolded slower than I would have liked. You know, I was 17 when we landed on the moon. And if anybody had told me then that here we would be half a century later and we would not be on Mars, I would not have believed them. We had a massive failure in political leadership in the United States in the Nixon administration, who canceled NASA's plans to go to Mars. NASA had planned to have people on Mars by 1981. And the plan would work. But it was canceled. So it was as if Christopher Columbus had come back from America the first time and the Spanish king and queen had said, we don't care about this. So there was an incredible failure. But that is why the failure of the government to pick up this challenge is why entrepreneurial leadership has now stepped to the fore. If it's not going to be done by government, it's going to be done privately, because this is something that humanity needs, and it's going to happen one way or the other. Oh, another thing. I missed that question. I saw someone asked it. What did it say?
Should I read it? What should we do to avoid the situation when Mars will become just another Earth with all its problems? Inequality, wars, ecological problems.
Well, it's what I said. The Martian cities that offer the best chance at leaving as much of possible as the worst behind will be the ones that grow. I mean, look, if you look at the New World here, not all the New World societies were better than those in Europe. If we look at South America, many of those countries offer less freedom than Europe and less opportunity and in every respect. And so they did not grow. The Mars colonies that grow will be the ones that deal with these the best. Now, there were people, you know, in Elizabethan England, there was a group called the New World Society, which said, well, we're going to start a new England and we're going to leave all the worst behind and just take the best with us when we start a new world. Now, that program was only realized partially. We didn't leave all the worst behind. And I don't think humans will ever leave all the worst behind because we are flawed beings. But, you know, look, while we have class differences in America, we don't have blood nobility, never did. While we had religious prejudice in America, we never had religious persecution or religious wars. So many of the things of the worst of the old world, we did manage to leave behind. Not all, but some. And enough that people would come here. And the Martian colonies, Martian city-states that offer people the best chance to fully realize their human potential. And this is everything from political freedom to economic opportunity to even aesthetics of the architecture of the city. You know, because people want to live in places that are beautiful. The cities that offer the best combination of those will be the ones that grow. So I do not think we will achieve perfection on Mars. I think we will achieve improvement on Mars.
Thank you, Robert. The next question is a bit more personal. What are your favorite sci-fi movies? What do you suggest?
My favorite 5 movies. Okay. Well, my favorite movie is Casablanca.
Sorry, I meant sci-fi, science fiction movies.
Oh, science fiction movies. Well, that's an interesting question. I like the first Star Wars movie, the very first one from 1977. Let's see. Science fiction. Trying to think. Maybe the third and fourth Star Trek movies. Let's see. I like 2001, although it kind of dropped the ball in the last part, I thought, when they wanted to have a fantastic revelation and they couldn't quite deliver, but still, taken as a whole, I thought it was a superb movie. The Martian have mixed feelings. I mean, Martian's an excellent movie. And it shows human ingenuity in contest with the Red Planet. And it's the first Mars movie that actually attempted any degree of realism at all. But the problem I had with The Martian was that the character is not interested in Mars. Matt Damon character. He's not interested in the search for life on Mars, and he's not interested in the human future on Mars. The great Mars movie has yet to be made.
Thank you, Robert. The next question probably comes from an architect. Maybe it's from my subscription list. What special Mars environment aspects should architects learn or explore in first place to create for Martian projects?
Okay.
Actually, I need to say for myself, we had a few master architect works in recent years, the designs for Mars colonies.
Right. Well, the Mars Society has published a couple of books, Mars Colonies, Mars City-States, in which different groups of people, different teams propose their ideas for the design of Mars colonies, everything from their architecture to their social institutions. But look, okay, you've got a couple of things you have to deal with on Mars. First of all, you have to create a pressurized environment. Secondly, you have to provide a certain degree of radiation shielding. It doesn't have to be total. Okay, doesn't have to be total. It just needs to be a fair amount. But I also believe it needs to be aesthetically beautiful. We don't want to have a kind of city like the one in Total Recall, or these other sort of, I don't know how to put it, steampunk cities. So how do you do this? Well, first of all, you can have domes, networks of domes, 100-meter domes on the surface, and these can be pressurized and filled with plants and above board habitations and structures. Now, people can walk around there, but the bulk of their habitations would be underground, because in other words, how much of your time do you actually spend outside? Okay, so, not 5%, most people, but 20% of your time, 5 hours a day. Most people don't even spend that much. So if you have the bulk of the habitation underground, but the outdoors above ground, then people can enjoy outdoor lit environments while basically reducing the radiation dose by a factor of 5, because most of their time is underground. There's also other things you can do. I find the idea of having the hab, as it were, under a lake, so that the shielding is provided by water, which is transparent. And so you could have natural sunlight coming down into the city and have people fully shielded. And in fact, you could have fish and other water life in that lake. So you look up and you'll see the fish swimming above you. So providing you both food and shielding and something kind of nice to look at. So there's quite a variety of ideas. It would be best if, while there's a certain amount of planning involved in the Martian city, that there's enough latitude in it to allow for unplanned growth. I think, for example, that some of the most charming aspects of older European cities are the network of the medieval streets and winding alleyways and so forth that is chaotic and thus sort of creates the possibility for surprise and unplanned development. Things are not too, I don't like things too organized.
Thank you, Robert. And speaking about the lake, as probably there are no conditions under present circumstances for open lakes on Mars, maybe the next question will be related to the previous. What do you think about terraforming of Mars? How far
Terraforming.
can go?
Okay. Well, I'll get to that in a minute, but I do want to answer what you just said. By a lake, I don't mean go and find a lake on Mars and put our city under it. There are no lakes on Mars right now. But under a dome, we could create a pond that is 10 meters of water deep. And then you can put the city under that. So I'm talking here about an artificial lake positioned above the city. Okay. Now, the terraforming of Mars. I think that humans will eventually terraform Mars because, well, first of all, it's the nature of life to take barren environments and transform them into those that are friendly for the development of life. That is why life on Earth has been a success. Life has radically transformed the Earth to make it better for life. For instance, oxygen in our atmosphere is an artifact of life. The early Earth, before there was life, had no oxygen. And by the way, that's how we're probably going to find life on other worlds first, with telescopes detecting oxygen in their atmospheres, because oxygen, and I talk about oxygen in quantity, like we have it here, not trace oxygen. Oxygen is very reactive. And there's all sorts of things out there that it can react with that are very common, like hydrogen, iron, carbon, much more than is needed to take up all the oxygen. So free oxygen only exists in the presence of a life that is actively freeing it from being reacted with as iron oxide, aluminum oxide, carbon dioxide, water, so forth. So we're going to do it. Now, how will we do it? I do not believe that the some methods that people talk about, like dropping hydrogen bombs on the Martian South Pole or crashing asteroids into Mars, or any of these what you might call violent methods, kinetic methods, will work because the people who are going to do the terraforming are the Martians, and they're not going to want to be crashing asteroids into their own planet. Be unsafe. So the way they'll do it, I believe, is through artificial greenhousing of Mars, setting up factories that produce artificial greenhouse gases that are extremely potent, like fluorocarbon gases, and using them to warm the planet. And then as the planet warms, carbon dioxide that is soaked into the soil will outgas, and it will warm the planet even more, and also provide radiation shielding and provide pressure, so that you don't need to wear a spacesuit anymore, just warm clothes and an oxygen mask. And then eventually, I think we'll use genetically engineered plants to rapidly oxygenate the planet. If we use the current kind of plants we have, take over 1,000 years to oxygenate the planet. But I think people will be able to improve plants on the time scale we're talking about. So yeah, I think terraforming is going to happen. And I think it's a real good thing. I think it will show that humans are not the enemies of nature. We are the vanguard of nature. We are going to expand the biosphere. We're going to bring many new worlds to life. Mars will be the first.
Thank you, Robert. And the next question is rather funny and personal. What is your favorite spacecraft probe which explored or exploring Mars? Maybe to your wish, lander or rover, you can answer.
Say it again. What is my favorite? What?
Spacecraft probe.
Spacecraft?
Yes. Maybe
What's,
a rover or a lander platform.
okay, what's my favorite spacecraft of anyone that has been to Mars so far?
Yeah.
Opportunity.
Why exactly?
Well, first of all, because it went the furthest against the odds. It was landed in 2004. It worked through 2000, I think, 18. And it did it with, how can I put it, less resources behind it than Curiosity or Perseverance. Those rovers each cost 5 times as much as Opportunity did. It's the little rover that could.
Thank you, Robert. And then from myself, from which of currently launched or planned or proposed space missions do you expect the most interesting results in the next?
From which missions that have been launched to space do I
or
expect?
maybe yet planned?
Well, first of all, if we're talking about space missions overall, the best space mission that has ever been done was Hubble and Space Telescope, in terms of science return, in terms of discoveries. And I expect we'll get even more from the Webb. These are extremely powerful science missions. And I think it's quite possible that Webb will be the instrument that discovers life on planets circling other stars through the method that I just discussed, by identifying oxygen in their atmospheres. Now, in terms of Mars, in terms of future Mars, the problem is that right now, the only future Mars mission that really is scheduled is sample return. And I don't think the sample return is the best possible Mars mission. I think for the cost of sample return, we could send a dozen rovers and helicopters to Mars, explore all over the place with all kinds of instruments, and do much more, than you get by returning, 5 kilograms of rocks. Now, of course, we could do still more by sending humans to Mars. There's no comparison between what human explorers can do and what even the best group of robotic rovers can do. So that's my goal, is the first humans to Mars mission. That's my favorite Mars mission.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for your inspired speech. If anyone else wishes to say, and thank you everyone who could join us. Thank you for your questions. Our event would be impossible without your questions, because everyone finds what interests them.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's my pleasure, and good luck with everything over there. I really appreciate what you're doing. Okay, thanks. Okay, bye.
В такому випадку дякуємо всім нашим гостям, дякуємо за ваше відвідування, за те, що знайшли можливість, за ваші запитання. Без ваших запитань подія б не набула такого вигляду. Я сподіваюся, вам було все зрозуміло. Якщо було трудно, то зможете потім за певний час подивитися запис на YouTube. у вас буде час послухати ще запитання. В такому випадку дякуємо всім. Олександре, запис ведеться на вашому комп'ютері, так? Запис збережеться у вас.
Я виключаю.
Так, можна зупиняти запис.